On January 14, 2018, a 17-year-old girl climbed out of a window in the middle of the night. She had never used a phone before. She had barely been outside. She had never been to school. She didn't know what McDonald's was. But she had one mission: save her brothers and sisters. When police arrived at the house on Muir Drive in Perris, California, they found 13 children ranging from 2 to 29 years old, chained to beds, starving, some so malnourished they looked half their actual age. One adult sibling was so emaciated he could barely walk. The parents were home, asleep. This is the story of the Turpin family, the house of horrors that shocked the world, and the second nightmare nobody warned the children was coming. From the outside, 160 Muir Drive looked like any other house in Perris, California, a quiet suburb, 70 miles east of Los Angeles. Desert heat, rows of identical homes. Nothing unusual. Inside was a different world entirely. David Turpin, 57, and Louise Turpin, 49, had 13 children, 10 daughters and 3 sons. The oldest was 29. The youngest was 2. The children were kept inside at all times. The curtains were always closed. Neighbors rarely saw them outside. What the children experienced inside that home had been going on for decades. They were starved, given 1 meal a day, sometimes less, a single piece of bread each, allowed to eat 1 small can of food at holidays. While the children starved, David and Louise kept the refrigerator full of food, bought pies, ate in front of the children. They were chained, literally shackled to their beds with chains and padlocks, sometimes for weeks at a time. When a child was finally released from chains, the remaining siblings would chain them back up themselves. They'd been told it was a punishment and had learned to enforce it. They were not allowed to shower more than once a year. They were not allowed to brush their teeth. They slept during the day and were kept awake at night. They had no friends, no education, no contact with the outside world. If they ate without permission, they were chained. If they touched a toy, they were chained. One Christmas, the parents bought pies, placed them on the counter, told the children they could look but not touch. The children stared at pies they would never eat. David Turpin worked as a computer engineer. He had worked for Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman. By all appearances, a normal professional life. Louise homeschooled the children, in theory. In practice, their education consisted almost nothing. The children could not use the stove, could not read a map, had no idea how to interact with the world outside their walls. Some of the older children had never been outside alone in their entire lives. For decades, nobody knew. Until January 14, 2018. Jordan Turpin was 17 years old. She had spent her entire life inside that house. Every day the same. Chains, starvation, darkness. But Jordan had been watching, listening, planning. She had secretly practiced using a deactivated phone in the house, learned how to dial, learned that you called 911 for emergencies. In January 2018, she overheard her parents talking about moving the family to Oklahoma. Moving meant new house, new location. If anything was going to happen, it had to happen now. On the night of January 14th, she waited until her parents were asleep. Then she climbed out of a window. She ran. Into a neighborhood she had never walked through. In a world she had never experienced. She found a stranger's house, knocked on the door. A couple answered. Jordan handed them a phone, asked them to call 911, told them what was happening inside the house on Muir Drive. The police dispatcher who received the call later said she sounded like a child. Small, fragile, terrified, but also certain. She knew exactly what she was doing. When police arrived at the house, David and Louise answered the door calmly. Then officers walked inside. What they found will be documented in training materials for law enforcement for decades. The 13 children, ranging from 2 to 29 years old, were severely malnourished. Several were chained to their beds. Some could not walk properly. Some had not bathed in over a year. A 22-year-old woman weighed 82 pounds. A 12-year-old was the size of a 7-year-old. Officers who entered the house needed counseling afterward. David and Louise Turpin were arrested on the spot. David and Louise Turpin had been married since 1985. David was 23. Louise was just 16. They had started a family quickly, then kept going. 13 children over 27 years. Their last child was born in 2015. Neighbors and family members who knew them before described them as seemingly normal. David worked in aerospace engineering. They attended church. They took family trips to Las Vegas. They renewed their wedding vows at a Graceland chapel with the children present dressed in matching outfits. On the surface, normal. But the abuse had started long before Perris. The family had lived in Texas for years. Former neighbors there later said the children always seemed thin, always seemed withdrawn. Nobody called anyone. In February 2019, David and Louise changed their pleas to guilty. 14 felony counts: torture, child abuse, false imprisonment, cruelty to a dependent adult. In April 2019, both were sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Experts in family abuse said parole was almost certainly impossible given the severity and duration of the crimes. David is currently held at California State Prison Corcoran. Louise is at the California Institution for Women. As of February 2026, both remain behind bars. But for 6 of the 13 children, the nightmare wasn't over. After the rescue, the 13 siblings were split up. The 7 older siblings, all adults legally, entered various support systems. But 6 of the youngest children, all minors, were placed into the foster care system. They had just survived years of torture at the hands of their own parents. Now the state of California was responsible for them. And the state of California failed them completely. The 6 children were placed with a family called the Olguines, Marcelino and Rosa Olguine, foster parents in Riverside County. The system had one job: keep these children safe. But Riverside County and the private foster care agency ChildNet placed the Turpin children with the Olguines despite one critical fact they already knew. The Olguines had a prior history of abusing and neglecting children placed in their care. They knew, and they placed the Turpin children with them anyway. What followed was 3 years of abuse. The Olguines hit the children in the face with sandals, pulled their hair, forced them to eat their own vomit, made them sit in circles and recount the trauma they had experienced in their parents' home, used their past suffering as a weapon against them. Marcelino Olguine sexually abused a child under 14. For 3 years, the children who had already survived the unimaginable were being abused again, by people the government had chosen to protect them. In November 2021, ABC News broke the story. The investigation revealed the siblings had been, in their words, cast aside by the system. Riverside County launched an independent investigation led by a former federal judge. In September 2024, the Olguines pleaded guilty. Marcelino Olguine was sentenced to 7 years in state prison. His wife Rosa and their daughter Lenny's were sentenced to 4 years of probation each. In 2026, the 6 siblings reached a confidential financial settlement with Riverside County and ChildNet. Neither the county nor the agency admitted wrongdoing. On February 3, 2026, 3 of the Turpin siblings spoke publicly for the very first time. James, Jolinda, and Julissa Turpin sat down with Diane Sawyer on ABC. Julissa said that when she was first taken from her parents' home, all she wanted was to feel safe. "I genuinely just wanted to be safe," she said. She didn't get that. Jolinda described the fear she felt as a child, not knowing if she would survive. James said he still wishes he had normal parents, people he could turn to for guidance, but he's learning to adapt. "I've always wished I had normal parents," he said, "but I have the internet, so it's okay." And Jordan, the 17-year-old who climbed out of a window and saved 12 lives? She's 25 now. She has 1.7 million followers on TikTok. She makes fashion content. She went to Disneyland with her sister Jennifer in August 2025. She looks like any other young woman on social media. But she is the reason 12 people are alive today. Jennifer, the oldest sibling, is 37. She got married in 2024. She published a book about her experience called Where Was God? A memoir about maintaining faith despite everything she endured. The siblings are healing, slowly, unevenly, painfully. Some are thriving, some are still fighting. But they are alive, they are free, and they are finally allowed to tell their story. The Turpin case isn't just a story about two monsters who tortured their children. It's a story about systems that failed, neighbors who looked away, family members who suspected, a foster care agency that placed traumatized children with a family they knew had a history of abuse. The children were let down not once but twice, and when the second abuse was exposed, the people responsible received probation. Probation. For placing children who had already been tortured into another abusive home. David and Louise Turpin are serving life sentences. The system that failed their children twice continues to operate. The Turpin siblings filed lawsuits. They settled confidentially. Nobody admitted wrongdoing. 13 children paid the price. Twice. Jordan Turpin climbed out of a window because she refused to accept that her life and the lives of her siblings were going to end in that house. She was 17. She had never used a phone. She had never walked through a neighborhood alone. And she saved 12 people. The system was supposed to do the rest. It didn't. But Jordan, Jennifer, James, Julissa, Jolinda, and the rest of the Turpin siblings are still here, still speaking, still fighting. Not for themselves alone, but for every child still waiting for someone to climb out of a window for them. This has been the story of the Turpin family.